Hello everyone, my name is Nick and I am here today with David and Margaret Akerman. Hi guys.
Hi.
Great to be with you. Thank you for having me. And today we're just going to have a little chat. I'd love to get a little bit more of your story and let's get stuck in. So my first question, which would be for either of you to answer, is when did God first become real to you?
Well, I think I must have been taken to Sunday school when I was about 6. And then I'd go with my mother to the evening service as well at the Baptist church that they went to, my parents. So I got involved with all sorts of background, sort of Christian background and Bible stories. And then I was a member of the Girls' Brigade and we went away for a week's holiday when I was about 14. Went to Hunstanton, camping on a church floor somewhere. And each night one of the older girls would do something like an epilogue. And the last night, Friday night, we were on the Worthing beach. No, not Worthing, is it? Yes, it was Worthing. Worthing Beach. And one of the older girls was reading the story of Peter walking on the water to Jesus in the middle of the night. And I thought, oh, wow. I'd heard the story before, but that just grabbed me. And then suddenly it was as though God was speaking to me. I don't know what he said in words, but I just knew that he was calling me, if you like.
Wow.
And I had like a picture of the 3 crosses on the hill, and I sort of realised what Jesus had done for me. And although I'd heard about giving my life to Jesus from quite a young age, that was the moment when it was all real for me.
Wow.
And I knew you should tell people, tell someone when God has met with you. So I told one of my closest friends, who was David's sister, and she looked at me as if I was slightly crazy, but there we are.
Wow, okay, so kind of had been born into a family that was a church-going Christian family, but at that age of about 14,
Yeah.
And it's really interesting you said he spoke to you. So was it, but it wasn't necessarily the words that were important, it was just a sense of belonging, was it? To him?
Yeah, of his presence, I suppose.
Wow.
And the fact that I thought he's calling me, he's speaking to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story.
Yes.
So David, how about you? So Margaret told your sister, and your sister thought Margaret was a bit crazy. At what point, how did it look for you?
I didn't know that story. My sister and I used to lie in bed singing choruses.
Okay.
So God was real in that sense. We in our way, we were able to worship. I started going to church because a girl at my school recounted this couple of the stories that she'd heard at Sunday school, and I went home and told my mum and said, I want to go to Sunday school. I've been doing that in the church ever since. Well, when I was 11, we went on. We used to belong to Young Worshippers League, and we had badges and that.
Okay, you and your sister were part of this?
Yeah. In the local Baptist church,
Right.
where we were going to Sunday school. And when I was 11, I was chosen to go on a young people or children's camp at Eastbourne. And I remember I did something that I shouldn't, and the person in charge said, what do you think God thinks of this, or Father God? And that, wham, made me think more seriously about what I was doing and whether I was living out the faith.
Wow.
But and later on I was baptised, but I wasn't filled with the Spirit until Phil was one on his birthday.
This is your son Phil.
Yeah. And on his first birthday, I was so keen to find out about life in the spirit. I got on my little moped and went round to, I can't think of the name, East Hampstead Park at Bracknell, that's right.
Right.
And I was late and it had been raining, so I was dripping, and I went into this hall where there were 120 men dancing in the spirit.
So there was an event going on that you were trying to get to? Okay.
For leaders. And there were various prophecies, and Derek Brown at one point said, men, this is not a firm or a company, a commercial company. We're a family. And the way he talked about God, just, if I listen to it now, the tape, I still got a cassette tape, he just sent us a chill down his spine.
So how old were you at the point that Phil was 1?
27.
So you'd already decided at that point, a long time previous, you were following Jesus.
Yeah.
What difference did being filled with the Spirit make to your walk with God?
You just walking on cloud 9 for a few days. I wasn't able to speak in tongues at that point.
Okay.
But I just felt, saw everything in sharper perspective and just see the world differently.
So, and then in terms of you two, Margaret, you were close friends with David's sister.
Yeah.
You shared this experience that you had. Now, even though David and his sister were believers of some point, she thought you were a bit
at
weird.
that point.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. So how did you and David come to be in a relationship and get married?
We were in the same church.
Eventually,
yeah, because eventually David's family came to the church that I was part of.
Okay. This is in Tottenham?
In Tottenham, yes.
Yeah.
And we just started talking, really, didn't we?
Mm. And then I sent you a Valentine card when you were 15 and I was 19.
It took me about 2 weeks to work out who it was from.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
So then that's kind of God first becoming real to both of you. 2 very powerful stories. Just as you think of back through your walk with God, maybe individually as a couple, are there particular events or stories or things that come to mind when you think about how God's continued to show himself to be real to you?
I think when I was a student, I was in the Christian Union, and one weekend a friend from the Christian Union came to my lodgings and said, "God's told me to come and pray for you to receive the Holy Spirit." Wow. I said, "Oh, really?" But I had been praying for that. And so she prayed for me, and I didn't really feel any different, and I didn't speak in tongues until the next day, the Sunday. But on the I began to speak in tongues, I think, because I'd been asking God for that as a gift as well. On the Monday, when I went into uni to study, I was in the library reading and writing, and it was the presence of God. I almost felt him standing behind me, behind my left shoulder in particular, for some reason, and just felt his presence all that day, really, really close. So that sort of confirmed, It was like his confirmation that he had heard me, my prayer, and had answered it.
Wow, that's amazing. And David, we were having a chat a few weeks ago, and I can't remember how we got onto it, but you were just starting to tell me about some of the healings you've seen, and particularly you spoke about the healing of your son Phil when he was when he was
1 year old?
1 year, okay. What happened with that?
Well, he wasn't able to walk, was he? He wasn't able to crawl.
He didn't crawl, really.
He didn't crawl, And when he was 12 months, you took him for a check-up at the local hospital in Tottenham. And you were told He'd got a deformed
femur,
thigh bone. And you look rather shocked. So the surgeon says, well, let's take an X-ray and come back in a week when it's been developed. And so you went back in a week. There was a different surgeon. He took out the X-ray from the envelope, slid it out, and put it back in again. Said there must be some mistake. Left the room. You opened the envelope, and it said no deformity at the top of the X-ray. Now, a friend at work and his wife were praying for us, and Margaret and I prayed during that week. And over the subsequent weeks, his thigh bone gradually straightened.
So his foot was straight instead of at an angle like that.
And it was something that you could obviously see.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
And by sort of, at the next check, he was just walking normally. So.
And when he was a teenager, he was very sporty, running and tennis and cricket, and chosen for the adult team for cricket. So it was wonderful.
Yeah, I was going to ask, a bit of an obvious question, but what did that do for your faith at the time? Can you remember?
Well, it's strengthened us to pray for other people. I remember after church we were having a cup of tea one morning in Tottenham when we'd become part of LifeLine in Tottenham. And I was talking to a very tall Greek guy who asked him what he did, and he's a painter. But he was off work at the moment because he got a bad back, and I said, would you like us to pray for you? And I went and got someone else, and we prayed for this guy, and he stood up and stretched, and he said, wow, I don't believe it. Oh! And the pain came back because he said he didn't believe it. So I explained that you shouldn't be negative about it. So he prayed again, and he was all right this time. He didn't say anything negative.
There's some pretty amazing stories. So there's been times where you've seen kind of healing happen.
Seen legs grow, people gone up for a healing line, and Ian Andrews was one guy, wasn't he, that had a great gift of healing. And people with backaches, he would often ask them to stretch their legs out, and he said, look, one's longer than the other. Would you like me to pray that one will grow? And it did. So he saw legs grow.
Yeah.
We went to Kensington and Chelsea Town Hall for some healing event, and there were people in a row in the healing line, and the speaker reached one woman who was enormous, very obese, and he prayed for her and believed God was saying that it wasn't her fault, it was a chemical imbalance in her body, but she would now shrink in size towards her right size, and as he prayed, she went down about 3 dress sizes. But he said, I'll have to stop there because otherwise your clothes will fall off. But during the next few days, you will recover completely and be the size that God designed you to be.
Oh my gosh.
And I rushed upstairs to get you. You were looking after Rhodey, I think. But by the time he got down, he was praying for someone else then. But it was amazing.
Yeah. So, am I right in understanding that the kind of first church that you were part of, that Margaret, that you were a part of, that David, your family joined, was a Baptist church?
Yeah,
that's right.
In Tottenham.
Okay. So how did you come to be involved in what is now LifeLine Church? I know there was obviously a few journeys.
I think it was because of Bill, the minister. Those that wanted to, he got into house groups and gave us very challenging questions like, what is church and what is worship, and really got us thinking deeply and praying.
This was while at the Baptist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And one or two of us gave testimonies. Most of the congregation just sat there with stony face, like when Maria's daughter was poured some boiling water over her head when she was very young. And we prayed that there would be no scarring, and God healed her.
Wow.
And we mentioned it in the Sunday morning meeting, and
Everyone was just looking at that.
yeah, you know. So those of us that were more keen to find God, we met on a Tuesday night, had a sort of Baptist-Costal meeting, and we used to share Sundays after the church meeting. We'd go and have picnics in local parks right across North London, and for the whole of that summer we were able to go out every Sunday, and then when it got too cold we had shared meals
In the church building.
in the church hall.
So, am I right in understanding that kind of, so people are not particularly moved by stories of miraculous healing? Was it kind of that a lot of people were just going there on a Sunday, that's kind of what they did? There was something in both of you where you wanted more, seeing God at work, and that started to lead to a closeness of relationship with this particular group that you started to build?
I think, and people in this group, as it were, had come across being filled with the Spirit, and had been filled with the Spirit, and it did cause some people didn't want to know about that, and in the end it was just getting too divisive. So we left, and we were sort of a bit like a house group. This was would have been in the 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And so in the end we left, and had a small group. But David knew one of what was then North London Community Church leaders, Loxley Ford. They worked in the same building.
Yeah.
And you got him to come along, didn't you? And started talking to us, and then we gradually, the group of us sort of became closer to LifeLine, until in the end we sort of joined up. The Tottenham group, there was a group in Tottenham.
Was Ken part of that group?
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I was chatting with Ken and John, Ken was talking to me about being part of Loxley's house group. So I'm guessing that's what you're...
Because Loxley lived in Tottenham.
Right, okay. So all of this was like taking place in homes. You weren't necessarily going to like a church building of sorts on a Sunday.
No,
we
went to visit Ken Humphreys.
No, we met mostly in homes, but we did have that room at the community centre in Wickham Road.
Oh yes,
didn't we,
yeah. For about 9 months, we were a separate group of about 25 people, including Lorraine.
So over time that developed into, because obviously I grew up in Hynes Park, so I remember my parents being in a group in Hynes Park. And was it then that the church would start meeting to get all the house groups would sort of come together?
About 7, I think.
Yeah, we did come for family days, they were called then, I think. And
once a
all
month.
the different groups would meet, and we'd come to those even before we changed. Did we? Even before we joined officially? Or
Yeah.
It's all a bit vague now.
We went to the Church Leaders Conference.
Oh,
when Anna Jarvis was 2. And
well, yeah. Phil was about 3 or so.
Yeah.
Herne Bay, we were invited to go to the Leaders Conference, weren't we?
And can you remember first meeting John or any of the...
First time I met him was in Alan Woodruff, a former leader's house in Tottenham. And I remember going to the church then, LifeLine Church, met in the High School for Girls.
The Tottenham branch met there.
And I remember Bryn Jones being there and setting aside John and Loxley to lead the people in Tottenham. And he talked about the women on Easter morning worrying about who was going to move the stone, and said God had got it all in hand. And he applied it to our situation there.
And so, and when I think of you both, I'm aware, not through any self-promotion from YouTube, but I'm aware of various ways and people whom you would just serve and really, you know, like I say, I'm aware of different ways in which you serve people. If you're not really the type to kind of promote your good deeds, as it were, I see you both as having a real servant's heart. What is it that you've seen of God, or that it is that just has caused you to be that way?
I think it's partly the general ethos, if you like, of the church, which is about loving and serving each other.
Yeah.
But you can still stand at the sidelines and look in. And I was thinking about an example when it must have been shortly after we'd sort of become part of LifeLine. Not here. We were still in Tottenham at the time. When God spoke to me about participating and not being a spectator. It was quite amusing, really. I was watching David and Phil playing chess. Don't like chess. I'm not a strategist. And I thought to myself, I'd much rather spectate than participate. And wham, because God spoke to me, and it really was an audible voice saying, precisely, and when are you going to stop spectating and start participating? Which led to us both, actually, I think, at that point, going to one of the first teams to Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Sort of abandoning the children and going off to Zimbabwe for a couple of weeks.
That's amazing.
I think it is that emphasis that we don't just look out for ourselves. We love and we serve each other, because that's what Jesus did. He was the servant.
And I love that story of Jesus washing his disciples, his mates, dirty feet.
Yeah.
This was the Son of God.
Yeah.
Washing the feet. No one else wanted to wash. Just to make them feel comfortable. You know how good that was.
Yeah.
Once you did it for me, didn't you?
Really?
Which is a lovely experience.
Yeah.
Never done it since, but
I have thought about it, just not got around to it.
But no, that's I think, when I think of just different ways in which I know you both serve, it's the washing of feet in a context that makes more sense. And so what is it that's caused you to stay, to be, how long would you say you've been part of LifeLine Church in all its different forms?
Since about 1984, 3.
Wow.
Ish.
Yeah.
Something like that.
John's been committed to leading the church. And whenever there's something to do and I don't really want to do it, I try and imagine what Jesus would do, and the heart that he had. And so even when I was in full-time paid work, I knew that I was working for God rather than the supervisor or the boss. So it's that attitude of that helps one to serve.
Yeah. And so when I think of where we're at as a church today, and I'm getting the privilege of being able to speak to people like yourselves and some of the other members of the church who have been around for a long time, and I'm struck. Everyone's obviously got their own individual stories, but I'm struck by the sense of, you guys were discovering something new, working out what it looked like to kind of live alongside and really live out what it is that God calls us to. Now, someone like me and people that are younger than me, I've grown up living in the fruit of that. So, what it's like, sometimes you don't realise, how do I say it? Sometimes you don't realise like the privilege that you have because you haven't experienced it. So I've grown up knowing, with a real emphasis on the importance of relationship, loving, serving, but kind of hearing some stories from people such as yourself, you realise this stuff doesn't just happen. You know, people filled by the Spirit who've met with God have then strived to kind of, not strive, but have worked to figure it out. So, which can lead to someone like me or people younger than me just taking it for granted. Would you have any words of advice for the younger members of the church and just what it, you know, the teenagers, the people in their 20s, and just, yeah, from your journeys, just what you've seen of God and being part of a church, would there be any words of advice or thoughts that you'd had for them?
One of the things is Bible reading. I follow a system whereby I read about 3 chapters of Old Testament and one of New every morning before breakfast, because a man of God once said that's what he did. And Jesus said you shan't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And so I read the Bible every day at breakfast.
Wow. In
different versions. Each year I will read it in a different version. I've got about 15 or 16 versions.
Really?
And it just makes you think more deeply about a familiar passage sometimes. That's good. And I'm always learning new things. You know, it's so rich.
Well, I just want to thank you both for your time. Hearing your stories is really encouraging, and I would say, as someone who, I'm definitely not the youngest member of the church, but as someone who is younger, just it raises my faith when I hear stories like you've been shared. So I just want to encourage you. These are good stories and good just experiences of seeing God move in your life. So David and Margaret, thank you.